Good morning. My name is Diana Warner, and I'm a member of Westminster's Palestine Partnership Team. The social justice forums are built around a common theme, and this program year, the theme is Building Solidarity Together, walking alongside all God's people, striving for a more just world, acting courageously to transform social systems and relationships. This morning, I am joined by three talented activists who will address how we can navigate competing media narratives and the complex conversations we need to have about Israel and Palestine. We will also introduce specific practices for engaging in these conversations and for turning our values and aspirations into positive actions. The presenters are Ruben Slomiansky, who was here last May and gave a wonderful forum that we're picking up on now and taking further. Ruben is a Jewish American whose family members included people who died as a result of the pogroms of the early 20th century and the Holocaust, and also now includes family members who suffer under the occupation in the West Bank. He is an artist and advocate for human rights and justice for Palestinians. Julie Elhard is a professional musician and educator who has Jewish relatives, colleagues, and friends, as well as Muslim friends, students, and co-workers. She decided to get off the fence in 2023 to put her convictions into actions and join Jewish Voice for Peace Twin Cities in their efforts to restore human rights to Palestinians and Minnesotans alike. Ariella Tilson is a Jewish American whose ancestors hail from Ukraine. She has 50-plus years of professional and personal experience in advancing racial and social justice across communities, sectors, fields, and geographic regions. Her background weaves together narrative, somatic, and meditative practices. Before we get started with them, a few logistical items. First, we ask you to hold questions and comments until after the presentations. For those attending in person in the Meisel room, raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you so all, including those on the live stream, can hear your question or comment. For those attending on the live stream, please submit your comment or question in the live stream chat, and we'll monitor that and raise your question and or comment. I would also note that we're preparing a lot of handouts on a variety of things to be used after this session. And if you're on the live stream and would like a digital copy of those, please email me at the address that will be put in the live stream, and I will send those to you. With this forum, we will also be introducing new guidelines for respectful conversations recommended by our speakers and confirmed by members of our social justice team at Westminster. The guidelines you see now on the screen are from the Peacemakers Toolkit, part of the Searching for Common Ground project. Just take a moment to look at them. Listen, prepare, practice active listening, disagree with ideas, not experiences, speak from your own experience, avoid generalizations about others, be curious. Good advice for us on lots of circumstances. Focus on empathy and reflect on your own beliefs with humility. So without further ado, I present Ruben Slomiansky and the rest of the presentation team.
Thanks, Diana, for that great introduction. Welcome, everybody. It's great to be here. Let's go down. Yes. Okay, so were some of you here last May or have seen the video? Some people have, a lot of people haven't. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to kind of recap some of the things that we talked about last May so that we're all kind of functioning with the same foundation of information. I know that, a lot of people here are familiar with what's going on in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. So we don't need to go into a lot of detail, but I think some information is helpful for us to know that we're sort of working with the same foundation. I just got to get used to the computer. So we're here today to examine how the language being used by our politicians, our media, and out in the community is being used to advance a narrative that favors a Zionist agenda and disadvantages the Palestinians. Our words and forms of expression have a significant impact on how we experience and function in the world. So learning more about how that works will help us to have meaningful conversations with others, even with those with whom we may disagree. Now, we're called to act because lives are being seriously impacted every day, and there's tremendous loss. The ceasefire that is happening may or may not continue. But the cessation of bombing and killing isn't peace, nor is what is going on there justice. Now, today I'll begin with some brief topical overviews for those who weren't here last May or hadn't seen the video or would just benefit from this recap. And then we'll do a role play demonstration led by Ariella and Julie, followed by an opportunity for us to try out some approaches for ourselves, and you'll hear more about that. Many of you likely have seen versions of this map illustrating the shocking transformation of the land looking at the period 1947 to the present. Early to mid 20th century, sorry, I'm having some difficulty staying on here. Hang on a second. Oops. Yeah, early to mid 20th century, Jewish settlements were present in modest amounts, and for the most part, people lived side by side in reasonable peace and cooperation. But when the State of Israel was established, it clearly and dramatically shifted everything on the ground. Huge amounts of land were transferred to the minority Jewish population. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forcibly displaced. Palestinians lost villages, farmlands, their economic infrastructure, their social structure, many being exiled or moved to refugee camps. As time unfolded, Israel confiscated more and more land, displacing many more Palestinians and systematically destroying their way of life while investing heavily in the growth and resources of their own Jewish population. There are many stories of institutionalized abusive treatment, administrative detention, child detention, forcible transfer of Palestinians off their land, home demolition, separate roads for Palestinians and Jews, abusive checkpoints, different judicial regulations and systems governing the laws for Jews versus the Palestinians, control over the natural resources, collective punishment. Now, these are common stories among the Palestinian people. So what are we supposed to do about all of this? How does this relate to our lives here in the U.S. and here in Minnesota? How do we talk about this with others, especially in situations where there's significant differences in perspectives and concerns? How do the words and language that we use drive the nature of our conversations? And what, if anything, can we all be doing, hoping to make any kind of change happen? Now, we hear a lot of words and phrases, some of which elicit very strong emotional responses and sometimes confrontational and even aggressive reactions. Boycott, divestment, sanctions. Now, here are some of the other common phrases: anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, Zionism, anti-Zionism, apartheid, genocide, Hamas, from the river to the sea. Israel has a right to defend itself. And there are many more. So let's explore the meaning of some of these words and phrases, how they serve or don't serve the people using them, and how they propagate throughout society to advance certain agendas. Hopefully we can gain some insights, advance our understanding, and perhaps develop some approaches and strategies for carrying on relevant and appropriate conversations. So let's start with boycott, divestment and sanctions, BDS. So in 2005, Palestinian civil society organizations called for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions as a form of nonviolent pressure on Israel to establish freedom, justice, and equality for the Palestinians. BDS stands for the principle that Palestinians are entitled to the same rights as the rest of humanity. Inspired by the South African anti-apartheid movement, BDS is having a major impact and is effectively challenging international support for Israeli behavior, policies, and practices. Now, the intent is to get people to boycott companies that work with Israel to oppress the Palestinians, like bulldozer manufacturers, companies that develop surveillance technologies, companies that are benefiting from products created on stolen Palestinian land. They ask for people and organizations to divest from investments that support Israel, like how Minnesota's State Board of Investment invests in companies on behalf of the state's pension funds. And they call for national and international legal entities to impose penalties for human rights abuses by imposing meaningful sanctions. Boycotts are constitutionally protected speech, and there have been several successful boycotts throughout U.S. history and specifically relating to addressing the treatment of the Palestinians. As an indicator of how effective the BDS movement has been, Israeli and U.S. Zionists have created a massive, well-funded campaign to stop BDS and to label it as an anti-Semitic attack on Jews and the State of Israel. Now, as it stands today, 293 anti-boycott laws have been introduced around the country. 235 of them have been passed, and 38 states now have this kind of legislation in effect, including here in Minnesota. What am I doing here? Okay. Now, Minnesota's State Board of Investment, the SBI, invests in companies on behalf of the state's pension funds. The Anti-War Committee has identified over $800 million invested by the SBI in entities carrying out or complicit in Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. Calls for divestment have increased significantly since October 7th, and this widespread awareness and activism is clear indication of the success of the movement. Now, applying sanctions is an important mechanism that the UN and our international community uses to hold each other accountable. The US, however, is at the root of our inability to hold Israel accountable, even though they're clearly acting in opposition of international law, and they do that by applying their veto power. Now, let's talk a bit about apartheid. The Israeli human rights organizations Yesh Din and B'Tselem, as well as Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, have examined the situation and concluded that apartheid is practiced in part of or in the whole of the territory under the effective control of the State of Israel. The Amnesty International report on apartheid is comprehensive, well documented, and painful to read. I highly recommend at least reading the executive summary. It's about 35 pages for a very clear explanation of what apartheid is and how it applies specifically to the situation in Israel and in the occupied territories. Using the word apartheid to describe what is happening in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank can result in very strong responses. And it's a great example of how language can impact the conversations that we have. Now, at the root of most of the pushback against trying to establish accountability with respect to Israel is the charge of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a deep-seated, entrenched, multi-millennium global condition. Anti-Semitism is real, and it's increasing at an alarming rate. It's absolutely terrifying for the Jewish people, and it should be for everybody, because history shows us that purges don't stop with actions against the Jews. The perpetrators target anybody who challenges them or their dominance, different races, religions, genders, economic status, even attitudes. And it's unrealistic and, in fact, dangerous for us to think that the kind of horrors that have occurred in the past are gone now, or that it couldn't happen here in the United States. We see it here every day, and we're already seeing the expansion of that sentiment to other target communities. But is raising honest concerns about human rights abuses and long-term systemic oppression of a people anti-Semitic? No, it's not. And yet, calling somebody anti-Semitic for raising questions and concerns about human rights and treatment of the Palestinians is a strong conversation stopper. And many people won't even talk about this for fear of being cast with that label. This is called smokescreen anti-Semitism, using the word as a smokescreen to deflect our focus, control the conversation, and stop anything that tries to hold Israel accountable. But branding people as being anti-Semitic for peacefully raising valid concerns about human rights abuses deflects people's attention from very real and serious anti-Semitic behavior, such as what we saw on the T-shirts and tattoos on the white supremacists at the D.C. Capitol on January 6, 2021. I think it's important for us to be aware that not all Jews speak as a monolith in favor of what Israel is doing. It's okay to ask questions. It's important to raise your critical concerns. Now, I've watched and participated in these conversations for decades, and I find it disturbing to see how language is being used, how people use misdirection, lies, anger, and brute force to control the narrative and silence opposition to Israel's behavior, policies, and practices. And our dominant media entities, even our so-called progressive media, are complicit in propagating and continuing false and misleading narratives. Now, we talked about some of the language surrounding anti-Semitism, apartheid, and BDS. What other kinds of statements are we hearing? Now, in response to the campus protests and calls to divest, we hear things like, things like the students don't know the history or they're uninformed. The students are unreasonable and they're affected by outside agitators. They're preventing people from having their graduation ceremonies. The university leaders are not acting harshly enough against the protesting Palestinian students. And let's not leave out the response to "From the River to the Sea." Yes, this is a chant used by people protesting the situation. For the vast majority of those people protesting, this is a call for freedom, equality, and human rights for the Palestinian people. It's also true that it's a phrase that has been used by Hamas as part of their perspective to not acknowledge the right of the state of Israel to exist. But most of our media and politicians only point to Hamas and refuse to acknowledge the call to freedom and equality. And we aren't hearing about former Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion's 1938 statement clearly indicating their intention. As a result of the creation of a state, we will abolish partition and expand into the whole of Palestine. And Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's own right-wing Likud party, in their 1977 election manifesto, states that between the sea and the Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. Why aren't we hearing about this? We also hear that the problems can't be solved because Israel doesn't have a reliable or trustworthy negotiating partner. Why are we not hearing about Benjamin Netanyahu helping to facilitate funding that supported Hamas and to weaken the Palestinian Authority and ensure that there was a division among the Palestinians, and that he himself speaks proudly about being responsible for preventing the development of a Palestinian state? Now, I've noticed patterns in these conversations: complete denial that any of these things are happening. They did this, so we did that. If they stop doing it, then maybe we'll consider stopping. The Bible says, followed by selectively using biblical references to affirm their right to be there and do what they're doing. There's often a stream of conveniently framed historical references, only those that support their position and deny anything else. Call upon the memory of the Holocaust. They're doing all of this to protect themselves from another similar atrocity. Shame and demean people. Call somebody an anti-Semite or a self-hating Jew. I get that one. Troll people on social media. When all else fails, use shock and anger. These tactics are actually quite successful in achieving their goals to stop conversations. Now, I'd like to talk about the power dynamic and normalizing oppression. We hear that the situation's complicated. We hear that there are different sides to the story. Now, in response to that, I ask, who has the power in the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians? The physical, legal, economic, military, and international power. Who is actually being forcibly removed from their land? Whose land is being confiscated, followed by repopulation by the people in power? Who controls the natural resources and the freedom of movement and economic activity? Who is being actually discriminated against and persecuted? And who is being arrested and indefinitely detained? Now, oppression of the Palestinian people has successfully been normalized. We see it, hear about it, fund it. We even expect it. It's become too easy to throw up our hands in despair and file it away for future considerations. Many people acknowledge it isn't right, but language, force, and money has been used to firmly establish the decades-long oppression as being the normal state. So where does that leave us? Well, we can acknowledge that these ongoing narratives clearly aren't solving anything. Meanwhile, the dominant power is successfully advancing its long-term goals to take over the entire land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, fulfilling their guiding principle of taking over the most amount of land with the fewest possible number of Palestinians on it. The approach is intentional, it's strategic, and it's accelerated now to the point where language used to talk about forcible displacement of Palestinians from the entirety of Gaza and the formal annexation of the West Bank is being normalized. So we need to center our conversations on the human rights and the behavior of the people involved and our own sense of humanity. We have to focus our attention on ways to address fundamental problems, root causes, and honest, compassionate solutions. There's never going to be a sustainable peace and security for the Israeli Jews unless this guides where we go from here. One population should not be allowed to establish their safety, security, well-being of themselves and the future of their children at the expense of another population. For me, this is not debatable. So that's the summary. Now I invite Ariella and Julie to come forward and move on from here.
Thanks, Ruben. That was a lot to take in, right? So before Julie and I go into a very brief role play, let's just take a moment to find our breath, find our feet on the ground, find a little prayer, whatever works for you to just kind of settle our bodies a little bit to be here. So just, for me, it's usually breath and finding my feet on the ground and connecting to even to the earth. Let's just breathe or say a little prayer. All right. Before Julie and I are going to do a very brief role play, and I want to manage a little expectations here for the next 10, 15 minutes, is that given the time, we are really introducing to you just like a nibble or a whiff of what's possible. And so just take that too, and hopefully you'll play along with us as we're trying all this out. Okay? Thank you.
Hey, hi, Ariella.
Oh, hey, Julie.
Hi, haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been what, maybe almost a year or something.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, what have you been up to?
Oh, well, actually, I've been involved in a group that's been trying to bring about some peace and rights for Palestinians in Gaza. It's just heartbreaking I'm watching in the news. And also I've been going to some protests, and I hear people. At first, I heard this and I wasn't really sure what it meant, but if you don't mind, I could ask you. I hear them saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." How does that strike you?
Well, I have to say, I've been brought up to feel like right now I have to pause. I mean, I'm really feeling really activated when I hear that phrase, because it is, as somebody who's Jewish, that feels very anti-Semitic to me.
Wow.
Why are you bringing this up to me?
Well, I guess maybe because I know you're Jewish, and I just want to get another perspective, and it's unclear to me sometimes. It seems like it's about Palestinian freedom, but how does that affect Jewish people and my relatives? And I have relatives who are Jewish and many colleagues who are Jewish. And
I didn't know that about you, Julie. Why aren't you asking your relatives then? I can't speak for all Jewish people.
Right, that's true. And that feels a lot more dangerous to me because I have this long-term relationship with my relatives. And how do I start bringing something like that up with them? And can you give me some ideas or?
Well, I think, we haven't seen each other for a while, so I'm still feeling a little weird about this, I have to say. And I am also in my own process of learning and unlearning where this came from and why, I am older. I grew up with all this, as a Jewish person, we can only be free or feel safe if there is a strong, powerful Israel. And so I'm, my own struggle with some of this. So part of it for me is learning and unlearning. And I'm just noticing how embedded this is in my whole being when I hear you say that, especially, so help me understand why now for you.
Oh, well, why now? I'm trying to understand too, because learning what I've learned is that Israel has to protect all Jews worldwide. So anything that might be dangerous could affect my family and you and everyone I know and love.
Right.
And so I'm just wanting to bring it up to highlight what we can do to help bring about peace and justice for everyone in that region.
Yeah, well, you asked really good. Well, I think you're embedded with the really good questions, and I appreciate your curiosity. And my sense is, even though we haven't seen each other for a while, I know I'm feeling your compassion, I think. So that's making me feel a little more settled, I think. And I think it's people say this is complicated, and I don't think it is. It's complex. Right? And so that's what I'm struggling with. And so as I feel my way through, what's anti-Semitism, because that has just been bandied about and used as almost as a weapon or, smokescreen, right? So I think it's having this kind of conversation. So I think being curious. And I know for me, it's like, how do I understand that being truly safe doesn't come at the cost of other people not being safe? And I'm still struggling with what that means and looks like as a Jewish person whose grandparents escaped the pogroms. Yeah, so it's like, I don't know. So I think we have to explore this together.
That would be great. I
Okay.
would love to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to go into a little activity. So it's an invitation. So what I'd like you to do is pair up with somebody at your table, or if you're back, sitting in chairs, pair up with somebody. Ideally, if you don't know somebody very well, that would be great. So hopefully there's not an odd number, but we will deal with that if we do. So please pair up, find a partner. And for those of you who are on live stream, You're going to be doing this activity on your own, but you will be invited to answer the questions on your own. So, does everybody have a pair? So you know what? Stand up. Why don't you stand up, find a pair, find a partner. Let's do. Okay, ideally I don't want 3 because we don't have a lot of time. So I'd like you to find, if we end up with 3, there should be only one group of 3. Is there an odd number somewhere? Because right here there's an odd number. See, there's a number of odd, find a pair. This isn't complicated, folks. I know you're smart. So, does everybody have a pair? Or is there an odd number? Is there an odd number anywhere? I see there's 3 of you right there, 3 of you right there. What? Oh, okay, great. All right, wonderful. Okay, so do you all know each other? Do you need to introduce yourself to one another? Do that briefly. Okay. Okay. So in your pairs, decide who's number 1 and who's number 2. Just who's number 1, who's number 2. Okay. So there's going to be a set of questions, and number 1 is going to be asking the questions of your partner first. And just know this is more like an interview. It's not a conversation back and forth. You'll be able to switch because I'll explain why afterwards, but you can maybe assume, you can probably guess why. But this is a practice in just active listening in a way. That's part of it. But so you will switch. I'll give you, you'll probably have 3 minutes per person, roughly. I'll give you about a 20-second warning before you switch, so you can wrap up where you are. And again, so for the people who are virtual, you'll be answering these questions on your own, just to jot them down. Ruben, do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so think about a time when you entered into a challenging or conflict-infused conversation, one that you wanted to avoid, right? Yet despite any discomfort, you leaned into it. In the end, the conversation went well, or at least okay. Perhaps it resulted in achieving a deeper understanding of the other or the situation itself. Maybe it even shifted your worldview even a tiny bit. Okay? So just contemplate. Okay, you can go. So, number 1s, you ready to interview your partner? Okay, these are the questions. I'll read through them, but they're up here. Say briefly, so ask your partner, can you tell me more? Just say briefly what happened. What helped you lean into and stay with your discomfort? What gave you courage or confidence to do so? What were some of the specific things you did that helped you stay in this challenging conversation? What did you learn from the person or the encounter? Name 1 or 2 skills you used in that conversation or something you learned from it to help you navigate that difficult conversation to go forward. So you can apply it going forward. Make sense? Okay, you've got 3 minutes, first round. Ready? Go. Okay, finish your sentence, and then switch. So number 2 will be asking questions of number 1. You've got 3 minutes. Okay, wrap up your conversation. Okay, If you can hear me, clap your hands. If you can hear me, clap your hands. Okay, we're going to be a little high school here. So, okay, if you can hear me, clap your hands. Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm just we only have a couple minutes to do a little large group debrief, and for those of you online, I'd invite you to also use the chat. So I'm curious, what did you learn about yourself, and what did you learn from your partner? What were highlights? And we will have Julie's got a mic, so.
Speak right into the top one. Yes, thank you. I learned that I used some skills that I didn't know I used in the meeting.
Perfect.
I had thinking about it, reflecting on it. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I did use some skills.
Can you name one? Or do you feel comfortable naming one?
Using I statements and speaking only for myself.
Great. That's a great example. Thank you so much. There's somebody over this table, and thank you, Diana.
I learned from my partner that it takes a lot of courage to speak, and sometimes it takes pre-planning to work out what's the right thing to say.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's somebody was over here, I think. Okay. No.
Yeah, I learned from this conversation that to understand this conflict and what's going on in Middle East is a must that you study the Quran and you know
Beautiful.
what the Quran is. If you don't know the Quran, how you are going
Right.
to understand the thinking of Hamas? If you don't know the Quran, how you are going to understand the understanding of Palestinian about oppression?
Right.
You see what I mean?
I do.
So it's a
do.
must.
Yes. Thank you. So thank you. So what did you, the real, I really appreciate that context to learn and study, and be in conversation with others to learn more about different lived experiences, different texts, history, everything. So what did you learn from this conversation about yourself or from your partner? Go ahead. Yes. There's somebody. Okay, back there, and I think with this might be there are two people. There was the woman in the back. Yeah, there was a woman in the back who I saw her hand first. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Conflicts are very uncomfortable, and if the other party is not wanting to have a conversation or puts a wall up, it's very difficult to know
Right.
how you proceed
Right.
from there.
Right. So conflict is uncomfortable, and it's a fact of being human, right? I mean, just think about it in terms of in our own families, with our neighbors, let alone what's happening, what we think is a world away, which is not. But it's so how do we do that? And then how do we do it with people who at least are willing to lean into a conversation with us, right? Okay. I think, well, somebody else had his hand up, and I think, and this will have to be the last one. I'm so sorry. I know, is that okay? Okay. I wish we had more time.
Okay. I learned that from Sandy that she, in a situation similar to mine, it was the family people that she was involved with. Maybe that's pretty common, but my situation was the same. But we had both had different reactions from it. She was courageous enough to confront and talk about it and bring it to a head and say at the end, I think you said that you love each other at the end with your face. Yeah. My family, and I give her credit for that because I didn't do that. I didn't have the courage, and I'm more of a person who is not too confrontive. I let things go a lot.
Right.
And I let this one go by the suggestion of another family member, this
Right.
woman's husband, and I let it go, and we still have not
Yeah.
We just backed away from it
Yeah.
for the sake of family
Right.
relations.
No, thank you for that. Conflict is hard, and it is every day in our lives. And I guess I just want to wrap up quickly. Is hopefully this gives you a little, as I said, a whiff, a taste, a nibble about that. Going back to, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, the person, Ronnie, that we all have skills, we all have learnings that we sometimes forget. We often forget. And so how do we reclaim those? And also, what gives us courage? And there's no right or wrong. These are always learning moments, right? We get to learn from our mistakes. I could tell you about my crazy family too at some point. But so I think thank you for playing with us. There's a lot more we could do, obviously, and thank you for leaning in and being willing to have a conversation and begin to reflect.
So is this on? Yes. Okay, good. Thanks, Ariella and Julie. As Ariella said, this is just a taste of something, and hopefully helps us to bring our own skill set or maybe some new ones. I liked hearing what people were saying about having the courage, and also, centering the conversation on how we feel about something and our perspective on the human rights of people, as opposed to the detail of somebody did this and therefore they did that. And those kinds of conversations typically don't go anywhere. So what can we do to change and save lives? That's one of the goals here, is not just to transfer a bunch of information, but also to take a look at, well, how do we actually do something? So first of all, let's not minimize the value of talking. Getting these ideas out into the public discourse has had an enormous impact on the last few years, especially since October 7th. And also, Ariella, Julie, and I have compiled a set of documents for you to take with you to help guide any kind of advocacy activities that you might decide to pursue. We have some topic background and talking point documents, some sample scripts to assist you in engagements you may have with legislators. So, for example, we continue to try to work towards a repeal of Minnesota's anti-boycott legislation. We believe that Senator Pappas is going to introduce a repeal bill in the Senate. We're still looking for somebody to introduce it in the House. I'm having trouble. There we go. And we also want senators and representatives to sign on as co-sponsors. So if you decide to have any conversations with people in these positions, there's information that can help you look through that. And I'm not expecting you to read all of this now because it's all in those documents. We have a copy of the official Senate anti-boycott repeal law that was submitted in 2023. It's going to be similar. We have a draft letter that we're asking legislators to sign and send to Attorney General Ellison to ask for a legal opinion about the constitutionality of the anti-boycott legislation. He's ready to do this. He needs to be asked to do it. And we have a document that provides some suggestions about reaching out to your legislators and a sample script to use in meetings or conversations. We think that there's going to be a bill introduced in the Minnesota legislature about the definition of anti-Semitism. It's being pushed in several states and at several colleges and universities, and also at the federal level. Proponents of this legislation are pushing forward a definition adopted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and it's a definition that labels criticism of Israel and Zionism as anti-Semitic and censors attempts to hold Israel accountable. We're discouraging this kind of legislation, but if they do move forward with it, we have a recommended Jerusalem Declaration, which is a different definition. We have a talking points document about this. We have a document about the Jerusalem Declaration on anti-Semitism, and we have a document that provides guidance on contacting your legislators, ideas about preparing for a meeting, and a proposed script to use in communications with the legislators or with their assistants as you set up the meetings. We also have a talking points document about divestment and actions targeted towards Minnesota's State Board of Investment. There are regular meetings of this group, and we have been presenting recommended steps for them to divest from funding Israel. We are asking the SBI to not reinvest $10 million in Israel bonds that come due in July and invest that money somewhere else. We also have a commit to action document for your use as you consider how to become more engaged and to commit to some action. And finally, a resource document for you to use as you continue to do more research and learn more about what is happening. Question your sources, do research, talk to people. Thanks, everybody, for your attention and participation. We can have a conversation, or you're going to do some.
I only wish we had a lot more time. Please sort through the documents on your tables. You take any or all of them, which give you some very specific ways that you can participate in the conversation and take action. Also on your tables, there is one page in the packet, which Ruben mentioned, called Commit to One Thing You Will Do. There are index cards on the table and some writing implements. I would like you to write on a card what is the one next step you will take to engage in this or to take action. You may take that card with you if you need to post it on your refrigerator or on your computer screen. So until you actually do it, have a conversation, contact your legislator or whatever, or you may leave it here as a blessing of commitment to advocacy. Reminding you that Westminster has a formal policy that supports advocacy for social justice. So, I need to make one more small announcement on behalf of the social justice team. First of all, thanking our speakers. They put so much into this, and I appreciate it so much. And frankly, we're hoping that sometime later this spring we'll be able to have some kind of a follow-up session. That would be really good, because there's a lot more that can be said or done. But next week, the Social Justice Forum will welcome a panel of community leaders from Community Emergency Services, Groveland Food Shelf, and North Point Health and Wellness to discuss food insecurity in the Twin Cities. We look forward to welcoming you then. Thank you very much for coming. Sorry? Yes, our presenters are willing to stick around and chat if you would like. And I know we're running out of time to put your own response of commitment, but thank you and stay tuned.